Hi, and welcome to the End Times Guy podcast, a very distinct podcast, perhaps the lowest recording quality you'll ever find. I don't have time to write a script. I just kind of do everything ad lib as I'm driving down the road, making a living. And you know what? God is wise in everything He establishes, and He set me up this way so that I don't need anyone else's money. I get to do this for free. And therefore, I have tremendous freedom to go ahead and say not what's politically correct, not what's societally acceptable, not what's pleasing to the ears, but what's just standard biblical truth. And I have such a tremendous privilege to stand solely on what's right and true. And man, oh man, that feels pretty good. But I read a news article today. I tell you, it's got my brain turning. It's probably going to do the same for you if you haven't read it already or seen it. One of the producers of VeggieTales raised the point that Christian media is going to have to start to address the LGBT elemental P community at some point, as children's programs are beginning to incorporate that sexual perversion is all it is, and confusion into children's entertainment. Arthur, one of the shows my children used to watch when they were of that age, had a gay wedding, and the students all thought, oh, it's cool, great. They never had questions like, why is a man marrying a man? None of that came up. It was just widely accepted and seen as a very positive thing. Now, children's entertainment is one of the most powerful tools out there for shaping the minds of the future generation. And the left is not stupid when it comes to that. They're way, way ahead, way out front in forming the minds of the youth through sex ed, through inclusivism and tolerance and transitioning and all the rest of the madness. The left is way out there in front, shaping the minds of the new generation. And the makers of VeggieTales brought up a very good point, but it's also a broader point. You see, wherever Christianity comes in contact with the world, this is a baker who is being asked to make a cake for a gay wedding. This is a pastor who is asked to have his sermon subpoenaed so that they can be combed over to look for hate speech. And this is happening in Texas, and it will almost certainly be happening more frequently in a wider degree as intolerance towards Christians grows. I really like the word Christianophobia. I think we should be using it. As Christianophobia grows, there's no law that says we can't use their tools against them. And as Christianophobia is spreading rapidly in North America and Europe, we're going to be subjected more and more to scrutiny and seen more and more as criminal, aberrant, intolerant, hateful, and all the rest of this. And there's going to be a divide in the way that churches and corporations and schools and bakers meet with this pushback against what they're doing. Some will bend. Some will yield, some will strive to make their message inclusive and tolerant, as the United Church and I believe the Presbyterian Church have already done, and other churches striving to be inclusive and tolerant, hailing it as showing the love of Christ. Well, that ain't Christ at all. Jesus would be confronting them over their sin right up front. He would not allow a person to continue in sin, because the truth is anyone continuing in sin will face God's wrath. That's a guaranteed fact. And Jesus does not want anyone to suffer God's wrath. His number one goal is the salvation of men, not the inclusivism of men, not the comfort or the good feelings of men, but the salvation. You know, if you're swimming in the ocean out there waiting for rescue, and your rescuer doesn't want to insult you with the wrong color life preserver, that's pretty stupid. Just get me something that floats right away here. I don't want to drown. I don't want to be eaten by sharks. That's my number one fear. But you know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter if you don't have a culturally inclusive and liberally tolerant life preserver. I'll take what you have. I want to be saved. And that's the heart of Jesus, is saving men's souls at all costs, no matter. I mean, if your choice is to drown or to be plucked out of the water by your hair, you know, it's going to hurt, but hey, at least you were saved, right? But we don't think like that. We're kind of brainwashed today to get on board with this inclusivism stuff. And one of the points he made in this news article off of CBN News was that today the LGBT community is kind of seen the same as blacks, where if we're not inclusive and tolerant, then it's like a discrimination, like racism. And I really reject that argument, because a black person is born black. That's all there is to it. You can see that the moment they're born. There's no changing that. It's a fact. Although Michael Jackson did seem to change his skin color. I don't know how he did it. But if you're born black, you're born black. And for someone to change your societal status based on the color of your skin, logically speaking, is really, really stupid. And we can all understand that. That's very straightforward. A person's skin color plays no, it doesn't give any value or loss of value whatsoever. I mean, in every ethnicity, there are good and bad. In every trade, in every socioeconomic level, there are good and bad everywhere. Everywhere we turn, there are bad black people, there are bad white people, but there's also good black people and good white people. And if we could see past skin color, we'd realize that. But gender confusion and sexual perversity is not the same thing at all. You're not born with those things. You choose those. A pedophile isn't born a pedophile. A pedophile chooses to molest children. And we're all tempted with various negative urges. There has to have been a point in your life where you really wanted to cause physical bodily harm to someone, but you didn't, because you know it's wrong. And that's how most of us operate. We don't do those things because we know they're wrong. That moral law that God has written on all our hearts, Dr. Mark Hauser of UC Berkeley proved that with an online survey taken by millions and millions of people around the world, proving that it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, how rich you are, how educated, what your skin color is, or religion, or anything else. We all have the exact same moral code written into our DNA. But he was a biological evolutionist who wanted to prove that we inherited this from Grandpa Monkey. And that's when he was discredited and cast out of the university, because he was fudging his data. It's funny, when you're proving the truth, you don't need to fudge the data. But when you're trying to prop up your evolutionary lie, all of a sudden you have to wiggle the numbers a little. You have to tweak the carburetor and get a little more power out of it. And he got caught and shamed because of it. And rightly so. Because that moral code didn't come from a monkey, it came from God. It was planted in us. We have the knowledge of good and evil. We know what evil is. And you take something that belongs to your neighbor and see how they respond. I guarantee you they're not going to be happy with you. Our moral code tells us taking something that doesn't belong to you is wrong. And when something is taken away from us that belongs to us, we're angry. That's all there is to it. That's the moral code in action. It prevents us from being adulterers, liars, murderers, thieves, all kinds of horrible things. God did that so our society wouldn't devour itself in a week or so. And when we have exceptions to that, when people are overstepping those societal boundaries, that's where the law comes in. That's where we push back and make sure that they hold the status quo. But that has been breaking down over time. Through Hollywood programming, we've been taught to accept homosexuality not as an aberrant behavior, but as normal and alternative. I love their use of words. They always know how to toy with words and make things sound better than they are. Homosexuality is not an alternative lifestyle. It's an abomination. It's an absolutely disgusting lifestyle. And the things that go on is not normal. Homosexual rompings and antics are profoundly vile and repulsive. And I won't even bring up a tenth of the horrors that I've heard, the atrocities. It's a very dark and perverse thing. And just because society doesn't want to accept the truth anymore doesn't mean the truth has changed. And for being in Canada, that could be called hate speech, even though it's true. And you know what? This is the thrust of this podcast, is Christians have to make the choice. There's going to be a divide. Some are going to yield and knuckle under and dumb things down, soften things up, try and get along. And others are just going to stand up and say it like it is. They're not ashamed of Christ. They're not ashamed of the truth. The truth doesn't change. Christ doesn't change. Our message doesn't change. So when a baker or a teacher or an entertainer is confronted with LGBT issues, each individual must decide for themselves who their master really is. Who is their Lord? If Jesus Christ is truly your Lord, then your allegiance belongs to him first and foremost. And you must uphold his truth for the sake of the lost. There's no option. If it costs us imprisonment, if it costs us our business, if it costs us our media entertainment empire, whatever it is that's at stake here, there's a price to pay for following Christ. And it's all wrapped up in denying ourselves, taking up our cross, and following him. He promised us that in this world we would have trouble. In one of the letters in Revelation, he told the church members who were faithful to be steadfast for 10 days. Oh, 10 days, good. We can do that. We can do that. Hold fast for 10 days. Okay. And then when they kill you, what? Wait a minute, back up a bit. They're going to kill us? Yeah, Jesus is expecting this group of Christians to be faithful for their 10 days of imprisonment, and then when they're put to death, they will receive the crown of life. You see, God's ways are not our ways. God's ways are infinitely higher than ours. He doesn't see death as a scary, horrible thing. It's just a doorway into super life, into a better place, a place of peace and rest and joy, a place where we're no longer outcasts and pariah, where we're accepted, loved, and joyful. He's saying, why don't you just come home? It'll be so much better for you. So we may be troubled by the thought of our demise, but Jesus isn't. He's saying, I know you're going to squirm and it's going to hurt for a minute, but then you're with me and it's all over with and you receive your reward and you're going to be so happy that that 10 seconds of pain will be forgotten, absolutely forgotten. So death, where is your sting? For those who are in Christ, it's just a doorway to a much better reality. This reality is polluted and cancerous and corrupt, and to fight to hold on to it is really absurd and really shows a deep level of confusion of not realizing all the glory that awaits us. So be faithful, be steadfast. It may cost you It may cost you friendship. It may cost you criminal charges. Whatever the cost, be faithful and be steadfast. Thanks for joining me. God bless you.